Welcome to Perspectives El Paso. I'm Leon Blevins, Professor of Government with El Paso Television here in El Paso, Texas. The guest today is State Senator Jose Rodriguez. I had him on this program a number of years ago when he was County Attorney for El Paso County. He now is serving in the Texas legislature and, in my perspective, doing an admirable job. Does that sound okay?
Well, that sounds great. Thank you for that, Professor.
Glad to have you on the program again in this different position.
I'm glad to be here.
Good. Now, you just, this is late 2017, and you had a regular legislative session earlier part of this year.
That's correct.
And then it led to a special session to deal with some highly controversial issues.
That's right.
So let's start with this. How many sessions have you now been involved in the Texas legislature?
I just finished my fourth session.
Your fourth session?
Fourth session.
Okay. Was this the most interesting and difficult and exciting session you had in all those years?
Well, it was, quite frankly, the most contentious, divisive, rancorous session that I have witnessed so far. And the interesting thing, Professor, is that if you talk to any other legislator on both sides of the aisle, whether it's on the Senate or the House side, you talk to any staffer, you talk to any lobbyist that are out there, and they will tell you the same thing. It's the most rancorous session that they can remember.
Okay.
And so it was a very difficult session because we had some very highly controversial social issues on the agenda: the bathroom bill, the sanctuary cities bill dealing with immigration, local control bills, anti-abortion bills, anti-LGBTQ bills besides the bathroom bill. So it was a very difficult session. On the other hand, being an optimist and a positive kind of guy, I thought for El Paso, the El Paso delegation did a good job. We were able to get some monies for our institutions of higher education. There were some cuts, but not to the degree that people thought we might get, including for the El Paso Community College. But we got approval for our dental school over at Texas Tech Medical School at the Health Science Center.
Were you involved at some point with the architectural school out at UTEP?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
We also continued the funding for the new pharmacy school. Last session, we got it approved, and there were about $7 million allocated for it. This year, the money was cut back, as it was for most institutions of higher ed, but it was enough for the pharmacy school to continue operating and to get their first classes going. So,
okay,
they were very happy about it.
That's the one I should have been thinking about.
The pharmacy school.
Yeah, the pharmacy school and new school there. But within funding even for the architectural new building at Community College.
Yes.
That's through Texas Tech. All these interrelationships, you're always involved in these interrelationships between state government, local government, county government, and the federal government.
That's correct.
That complicates life, doesn't it?
Well, it does, because you're dealing with all these levels of government and levels of distinct guidelines and regulations and personalities even sometimes. Right. The bureaucracy that determines whether you're successful or not. And that's why I feel pleased about, at least on a local level, we did very well. For the first time, we got $32 million for what's called a transportation intelligence system to expedite the 18-wheeler trucks coming in from Mexico, bringing in the commerce and trade, since Mexico is the #1 trading partner for the state of Texas, the #3 trading partner for the United States. This is an intelligence system that is driven by technology, where the trucks are inspected in Mexico, and once they're inspected and cleared, they're microshipped with some high-tech gadgets, and they can cross over without stopping, and they get tracked all over the country to the point of delivery. And if there's any deviation, if there's any opening of the truck, if there's some kind of anomaly, it's going to be detected by the technology. that'll send warnings to the headquarters here in El Paso, and they can quickly inspect that truck to determine whether there's been any tampering with the products in the truck.
And we, the public, benefit from that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Not just in terms of the trade, which is billions of dollars, but think about all those hours that these trucks right now spend on the Zaragoza Bridge or the Bridge of the Americas, where this intelligence system is going to be implemented. Those hours, 2-3 hours, translate into congestion, translate into backups, translate into environmental pollution. And so it's going to be I think, a model for the rest of the state, because the idea is that with these monies, if this works, and we're confident that it will work, because it's been tested a lot, then it's going to be something we can apply to all of our ports of entry across the border.
Okay, now, so these issues of transportation and education and medical education and so on, positive, positive, positive. Those things you mentioned that were controversial are mainly social issues.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what other, before we get to social issues in, what were other positive accomplishments you think in the last general and special session of this year besides that one?
Well, we, for example, were able to continue more funding for our mental health system. And Texas ranks, used to be 50th in the country. We've moved up to 49th the last I looked. So we're still down at the bottom, so let's start with that. But in the last two sessions, 2015 and now 2017, we added a lot more money. In this session, it was $160 million for things like eliminating the waiting lines when people are trying to access services at the psychiatric center here or our MHMR centers, not just here in El Paso, but across the state. We put in money for community grant-funded programs that will address, mental health for people who are involved in the criminal justice system or for juveniles and so forth, and kids. And so that's a very positive development. The other one that deals with children, although it didn't go as far as I wanted, as I would have preferred, because, I was county attorney and I did all of the child abuse and neglect cases and foster care system here in El Paso County. So I'm familiar with the system. The state allocated a little over $500 million, 500 some million, to hire additional caseworkers and to provide additional training so that we can deal with the backlogs and all of those horror stories that we've been reading in the paper for the last 2 years about children dying in the foster care system, children having to spend time in the state agency corridors at night because there's no place to place them. And so that was a very positive move forward with our foster care system and child protective services. And the reason why I say I myself was not as satisfied as I would have been is because the agency itself asked for $1 billion in their legislative appropriation request in order to really meet the needs. And they got just a little over half of what they asked for. But hey, that was a big, big step forward. Now, realize that the state is doing this because they're under a federal court order. A judge telling them that children going into the foster care system come out more damaged than how they went in.
So you'll have to work on that some more in the next one. Okay, let's move to the social issues and some of the time we have left. Contentious issues. I don't know if the public knows what you're talking about when you say the bathroom bill.
Yes.
Or you talk about sanctuary cities. So let's deal a little bit of the social issue, the extreme religious right in our state, dominating a great deal of politics and government. How did you handle all of those issues?
Well, I opposed all of those measures. I was vociferously debating those measures on the Senate floor and even in the committee hearings because when you mention religious right type of issues, there's this whole trend here in the state and across the country, particularly in the South, to inject so-called sincerely held religious beliefs into government. In short, we all know about that county clerk in Missouri who said that she wasn't going to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples after the Supreme Court decision came down saying that it was unconstitutional to deny same-sex couples the right to marry. It struck down, of course, the state constitutional provision that we had here that prohibited it as well. And so there were these people that were advocating, including the Attorney General here in the state and others, that if anybody has a sincerely held religious belief, they ought not to be prevented from exercising that belief in a way that doesn't interfere with their religious conscience, their beliefs. Meaning that in this case, the clerk, if she didn't want to issue a marriage license to the same-sex couple, she didn't have to. Well, that's reared its ugly head here in the state. In fact, I was talking about foster care. There is a bill that passed this last session that says that now, instead of the state Department of Family and Protective Services placing children in foster care, now they have authorized nonprofit or private or profit-making private companies to do child placement. And that includes, religious organizations like Catholic Charities and others. And in that provision, so we're giving them state money to do that work that the state used to do. We're kind of outsourcing that particular task. And then on top of that, there was an amendment that was added over my vociferous objection, Professor, that said that if anybody, the agency as a whole, or any of the employees, or any of the administrators, exercise a sincerely held religious belief, they don't have to place a child with a same-sex couple. They don't have to place a child with a Muslim family. They don't have to place a child with anybody that they say their religious beliefs precludes them from doing so.
Did that become law?
Yes. Yes, sir. And that type of amendment was being offered in all kinds of other bills. Okay? That's just one example. And so it's a dangerous trend in my view, because I think it is, number one, you're using state dollars, federal tax dollars, public tax dollars, for what used to be a governmental function now being carried out by a non-governmental entity. And on top of that, we're now allowing them to inject the religious freedom argument to determine whether or not they carry out their, as I said in the Senate floor, their duties and responsibilities required under law.
Well, that's quite striking, because religious arguments were used to justify slavery.
Yes.
Religious arguments were used to justify the segregation, Jim Crow laws
That's
of
exactly
our society.
Right.
And here we are facing this battle still going on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's now really taking hold across the country. In fact, just yesterday, I received the new interim charges that the Lieutenant Governor issued for the interim period. This is a time in between sessions when all the committees, both on the Senate and House side, are tasked with investigating, getting testimony on issues that we will be facing in the next session of the legislature, in education, in healthcare, environment, transportation, and so forth. Well, in some of those charges, the Lieutenant Governor has asked the committees in the Senate side, in particular the State Affairs Committee on the Senate side, to look into whether local governments are implementing any policies interfering with sincerely held religious beliefs.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let's deal with, before our time is gone, with the sanctuary cities.
Yes.
SB 4, I believe, was the
Yes,
bill
sir.
that passed over objections of our county sheriff, Richard Wiles, and many sheriffs from around the country, around the state. What about that? You got in that battle, didn't you?
Well, I sure did. I mean, that's a bill that I have opposed since I went into the Senate in 2011. This is a bill that was introduced in 2011, 2013, 2015, but there was not the support for it at that time. In fact, we had some Republican colleagues on the Senate that helped us stop it the last time.
Okay.
But now the Lieutenant Governor has built up so much control over the Senate and the senators in his party that nobody wants to cross him. And so those two senators that helped us the last time were not available this time.
Okay, tell the audience what this is about.
Senate Bill 4 is what we call the Show Me Your Papers law that passed this time in the Texas legislature, similar to the Arizona statute, Senate Bill 1070, that went all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And we call it the Show Me Your Papers because it at its heart gives discretion to local law enforcement to inquire about immigration status, which means to enforce immigration law. And those of us who object to that, of course, say that is a task assigned under the Constitution of the United States to the federal government. You know, that's a federal responsibility, not a state responsibility. Right. But this bill goes much further. It also prohibits any local governments, the county, the cities, from developing any policy that is construed as preventing local law enforcement from cooperating with the federal immigration authorities in enforcing immigration law. That's why it's called the Sanctuary Cities Bill, because the governor and others who advocate for this type of legislation, they do it all over the South, by the way, right. Not just Texas. They say that cities are becoming sanctuary cities, giving protection to undocumented immigrants and not cooperating with the federal immigration authorities and having them deported. So it prohibits that and penalizes communities that are construed to, mind you, nobody has ever issued a definition of what a sanctuary city is. Okay, for starters. So if there's anything, any kind of policy, any kind of guideline that a community has, then they would be deemed a sanctuary city. Now, El Paso is in a peculiar situation, unlike any other local government in the state, because we're under a federal court order. You may recall some years ago when I was county attorney, Carl Starr with the ACLU sued the sheriff's department because they hauled him off of a public bus and asked him about his immigration status. And the settlement called for the county prohibiting the sheriff's department and the deputies from acting as immigration officers and require them to undergo some training. We're still under that court order. And so we're caught in, as they say, the proverbial rock in a hard place, because on the one hand, the federal court has said you can't be enforcing immigration law. Senate Bill 4 says you have to assist in enforcing federal immigration law.
Didn't it strike you as strange that conservative Texas has always said, keep the federal government out of our business, keep the federal government out of our backs or off our backs, and now they're coming along and saying, now we want the federal government to be on the backs of local, municipal, county governments to enforce federal law.
Yes.
Instead of leaving that up to the Border Patrol and immigration.
Well, and not only that, the other variation that I think is pretty ominous, frankly, is particularly in this last session, it was one of the hot button issues, and that was the state wanting to set aside local control, meaning cities and counties having their own local laws, and saying that only state law could govern in a particular area. The famous case that first came up was last session when the city of Denton, up in North Texas, voted overwhelmingly, almost 70%, 67% or something like that of the voters, voted to adopt an ordinance banning fracking within the city limits. Not just banning fracking totally, but just any fracking within the city limits. Fracking is that process that is used to inject a lot of forced water into oil wells in order to be able to extract, gas and oil. It's a new technology that's brought some new life to the Permian Basin, and it's sprouting up all over the country. But it does have some consequences. There's tons of scarce water resources that
and
are
some
used.
have had earthquakes because of
earthquakes in Oklahoma that you've been reading about lately. A lot of people say that has to do with the fracking that's been taking place all over the state in Oklahoma. But the bottom line is the citizens of Denton voted to prohibit that within city limits for obvious reasons. And the state in 2015, in the last session, next to last, voted to overturn that and say that only the state can pass a law regulating fracking. This last session, there were state attempts to regulate tree ordinances, permitting, contracting. I mean, all of these things are done at the local level, as we all know.
Right.
And the state is now wanting to say, no, you can't do that. It's a state that should be doing that.
Doesn't that come through special interest lobbies?
Absolutely.
This is what you're always battling, the special interest lobbies.
Absolutely. It's a special lobby. Mind you, we should be anticipating that there's going to be a state bill that will do away with our local ordinances, for example, that put more regulatory oversight over payday lending, for example. We passed an ordinance in the city that I was very supportive of that addresses wage theft in terms of the contractors that are hired by the city. Now, for example, being asked to indicate whether they have had any claims filed against them for wage theft. Obviously, why should our tax monies be contracted out to an entity that doesn't pay its workers?
Right.
But there's talk already about overturning these ordinances with state laws. See, so those were some of the controversial bills. The bathroom bill, of course, was very prominent, took up a lot of energy and time. The lieutenant governor was insistent on passing that bill. And basically that bill was intended to tell our public schools that they can't develop any policies that allow transgender children to use a bathroom that conforms to their gender expression, and I sat at the committee hearing. There was no evidence, not one case of any transgender children, or adults for that matter, going into a bathroom and attacking women, assaulting women, or doing things. The lieutenant governor and others who were proponents said, we don't want men going into women's bathrooms. Well, I don't either, right? Who wants that? Nobody wants that. And there's current laws in the books, in the penal code, that provide,
Right.
sanctions for that. What they never were willing to accept or appreciate, because I posed the question both at the committee hearing and on the Senate floor, if a transgender person goes into a bathroom with their expression as a woman or a man, regardless, let's see what bathroom they went into, are they just your normal man that went in there and is going to assault women? If it's a transgender woman that goes into a woman's bathroom, is that person going to assault another woman?
And they gave you what answer?
And the answer, they couldn't answer it. And the answer is no, because those people don't consider themselves a man.
Right.
They're not about to go and abuse a woman. What's the matter with you? There was a expert testimony, right, that talked about all of that.
Right.
But they refused to accept it. And they kept giving examples. Well, we have all these peeping toms and we have all these men that have done these things. Well, but those are things that have been happening for time immemorial with men that do those things, and that's why we have laws that addresses that. Well, thank goodness that there was not support for that bill, not in the regular session and not in the special session. But it created a lot of controversy, a lot of friction, a lot of discord.
And took up a lot of your time in a short session to begin with.
To begin with, where we should have been spending time trying to fix our broken school finance system, to put more money into that system, where we could have done more to provide more access to health care, where we could have spent more time on economic development issues, job creation type of issues, the things that really matter to the citizens of this state. But you go and conjure up all these fears about dangerous immigrants through Senate Bill 4. You create fears about the transgender community that are unfounded. And what do you have? Well, you have, people who are saying, we want something done about this.
Okay, our time is almost gone. Look ahead. You and your staff, how many people are in your office that work there in El Paso?
8 staff members apart from myself. I have 4 people here in the district office in El Paso and 4 people up at the Capitol office. And during the interim, we spent time doing research on legislation that we're going to be addressing in the next session. I spend a lot of time at these interim committee hearings. I've already been to one in Galveston on Hurricane Harvey. I'm coming up on another one in 3 weeks on transportation. And we just got, as I said earlier, the charges for all the other committees. So I serve on the Agriculture, Water, and Rural Affairs Committee. We're going to have some hearings coming up. And also, of course, Natural Resources and Economic Development committees. Oh, and also Veteran Affairs and Border Security.
Oh, that's a lot. So in your prioritization, what do you have at the top of your list that...
I mean, for me, the top of the list is always education.
Okay.
And right close to it, almost even with it, is healthcare, access to healthcare.
Okay.
And then jobs, economic development, opportunities for people.
Okay, what about your relationship with Texas House?
Well, the relationship has got to be good because whatever bills, and I passed 50 bills this last
you had a
session,
leader.
I got to get support from the people over on the House.
Yeah, you had some more support over in the House opposing some of these
Oh, yes.
social issues than
Yes.
you had in the Senate. You had a
Yes.
more conservative Senate than you had House chamber, right?
Definitely, absolutely. I mean, if it weren't for Speaker Strauss, the Speaker of the House, Joe Strauss from San Antonio,
Okay.
if it weren't for Chairman Byron Cook with the House State Affairs Committee, we probably would have a bathroom bill in the books right now.
Okay.
We would have had some of these local control bills that the state wanted to assert itself on the books right now. And so they're a more measured, right now, a more measured approach to legislation, kind of like what we always used to think about, Republicans working with Democrats to reach consensus, build compromise. You still have that in the House. You don't have that in the Senate anymore.
Okay.
Not on the hot button issues. Now you do have it on bread and butter issues, things that are important to our constituents. I mean, that's why I passed 50 bills. I had to get the approval of there's 11 Democrats, but there's 20 Republicans in the Senate, and you need to get at least 19 senators to approve you bringing your bill up on the floor for debate so you can pass that out of the Senate. So there's only 11 Democrats. That means that I need 8 Republicans on any bill that I want to pass. To
and
pass.
Also, you have a team from here in El Paso in the House.
Yes, there's myself, and then we've got our representatives, Joe Pickett, Joe Moody, Mary Gonzalez, and Cesar Blanco, and of course our newest one, Lina Ortega. So there's 5 House members and 1 senator. And
you're much more unified as a group from El Paso than some of previous times I remember in El Paso history.
I would like to think so, Professor. I think so. I think we've all strived very hard to avoid, fighting amongst ourselves. I mean, sometimes we disagree on an approach or something, but we've been able to resolve those things without having to, be out in public in the media and all that sort of thing the way it used to be.
Well, we're glad to have you on again.
Well, I'm glad to be here as always.
And so I never
Happy
know.
to come anytime.
Maybe another time in the future I'll be sitting here with the governor of Texas or something.
Well, I don't know about that.
I
do want to come and talk about our democracy, just in general.
Okay, we might do that on another program then.
Yes,
talk
sir.
about what's happening in the United States.
I think we face a lot of threats, both at the state and federal level.
I salute you. Thanks. I made it through the program
there you
today.
go, without coughing or anything.
Okay, and thanks for watching another program we call Perspectives El Paso.